use my power bank at some point. This thing's already going down to like 70%. All right. Okay. Once this is fully charged, if I need to, I can switch devices. Shalom, everyone. I'm Brother Doug, as always, with the Awakened by Yahuwah Assembly in Yahuwah Almighty Yahushua Messiah. Today, I'm with my mom, Sister Sharon, our brother Yahusha, our brother Dennis, and I think I said Sister Marissa, but just in case I didn't before, we are going to be going into what is the feast dedication versus what people claim Hanukkah or the feast of dedication is today. Is this modern Hanukkah that Judaism keeps, most of the Hebrew roots people keep? Is that the same thing as the original feast dedication? So we're going to go into that. Just give me a chance to. All right, hold on a second. I wanted to open Google Docs here. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Got a little indigestion today. Okay, it should be more than this. I was about to say. Okay. Feast of Dedication, first bullet point I have here. Feast of Dedication, for the most part, initially was never called the Festival of Lights. So let me just add the word initially, because it does get called the Festival of Lights, but much later on. Was initially the original feast of dedication was to be celebrated like Sukkot, Second Maccabees 1:8. So let me go to that real quick. Man, chest is tight today. All right, you version, where are you? Where are you? There we go. So I think I'll just use King James with Apocrypha just for familiarity here. Okay. All right. Let's just see here. Let me make sure I'm on the right Bible here. Oh, wow. I didn't have this downloaded yet. That's interesting. Okay. Let's go to. Come on. Come on. All right. Change here. Second Maccabees. Okay. Chapter 1, verse 8, I believe it is. Okay. So it says. Okay. What the heck? All right. Interesting. It's weird. Okay, they have it as verse 9 for some reason. That's weird. Oh. Okay, the King James version has it worded very weird. Hold on a second. The King James says to keep the Feast of the Tabernacles. That's weird. I think that's why people don't see this. I can see why people are confused now about this. I usually like to go with where is it? Go to Bible Gateway here. Second Maccabees, no, not 9:8, 1:8. Let's see here. I think it would have been in. Here we go. This one should have it. Really? Because this is a Catholic edition. It should have it. It's interesting. There we go. All right. Huh. That's strange. Strange. I could have swore I found this last night. Because one of the versions actually does say to keep it. Let's see if I can find. Maybe I got it. I know I sent it to Sister Marissa too on Telegram a little while back. Let me see here. The screenshot should be somewhere down here.
Oh, let me check.
Yeah, I'm looking too. I'm trying to see because I know I sent it to you. The screenshot of it. Let me see. What does this say? Oh, that's something else. All right. Um.
Oh, yeah, here it is. It says, is Hanukkah and the Feast of Dedications the same?
Yeah. Let me see here.
Is that what you're talking about?
No, it's an old screenshot I sent you of Second Maccabees chapter 1, where it talks about you are to celebrate it as the feast of dedication. As tabernacles.
You sent it
Uh,
via Telegram?
yeah, it was in
Okay.
our private chats. I think. Yeah,
Okay, I
here we
see.
go. All right.
You found it?
Yeah, so right here, guys, and I'm going to try to find the right verse in this chapter. It says, Second Maccabees chapter 1, we are now supposed to keep the purification of the temple upon the 25th day of the month Chislev. We thought it necessary to certify you thereof, that you also might keep it as the Feast of Tabernacles. So I see what happens. Certain translations leave out the is and the as, I guess, because it's not originally there. But it would make sense that it says keep it as the Feast of Tabernacles. Obviously, this Feast of Dedication is not literally Sukkot, so I understand that it and as might not be literally there in the Latin or the Greek, but it's kind of inferred in the context. So I see why certain versions just say keep Sukkot, which doesn't make sense because it's not literally Sukkot. You're keeping it like the festival of Sukkot is the context. So anyway, just wanted to show people that. I think that's why people get confused and they think it's just talking about Sukkot. But the context is this is a traditionary feast that Judas Maccabeus is instituting, that he's saying, as the manner of Sukkot, you are to keep this feast. That's kind of the point. So for it to just say to keep the Feast of Tabernacles, it makes no sense. To me, it would make no sense because they're talking about keeping the Feast of Dedication. They're talking about rededication of the altar. That's not the festival of Sukkot had nothing to do with cleansing the temple. You know what I'm saying? So for it to just say that it's literally Sukkot doesn't make much sense. So I understand why certain translators leave those two words out. I get it. But I think the way our English language works, you need to have words like that in there because you it's almost like it's almost like you're being deceptive by not having those two words in there because then people are thinking it's just talking about celebrating Sukkot and that it's not the feast of dedication. So, I know that would lead me to believe that if it's just worded as we're keeping the Feast of Tabernacles. So that's, to me, it would be very deceptive to do that. So let me just see here. Second Maccabees 1. What's weird is trying to see where exactly. Yeah, see, yeah, so it's making you think that it's talking about the Feast of Tabernacles. So yeah, that's where leaving out two words like that is a big deal. And I understand it's not there in the original language, but it's kind of inferred in the story. It's inferred to what is being talked about. Number two, you don't keep the Feast of Tabernacles in Chislev. Mm-hmm. And there's no commandment or allowance in the Torah for you to redo tabernacles. So obviously, what they're talking about is keeping Hanukkah as a Sukkot or like Sukkot in context. Mm-hmm. So that's the first point I wanted to bring about. It would appear to seem that everyone that's pretty much doing this feast today is doing it wrong, because from, I don't know, anyone can correct me here, but almost none of us today, no one that I know of that celebrates the Feast of Dedication is keeping it like tabernacles. I have not seen. There could be. I just might not know of them. But even the Messianic Jewish Hebrew roots version of it is, you're just kind of reading. You're reading about the story. You got the menorah lit and all that. Even the menorah being lit is not what it was about. The menorah part of it was about bringing the menorah back into a cleansed physical temple, not your temple of your body. And that's another point. Mm-hmm. The cleansing had nothing to do with us spiritually cleansing our bodies or physically cleansing our bodies. Hanukkah was originally about cleansing Yahuwah's dwelling place in Jerusalem. Just want to make that clear. This whole spiritualizing and take Paul's letters to spiritualize the meaning of this optional festival, as in, well, we can cleanse our temples. That's not what it was about. The original meaning of that festival was not about that. So I think we're being very dishonest when we super spiritualize things that are different contexts. What the whole purpose of this feast, and you can read it for yourself in First and Second Maccabees, the whole purpose of this story was them taking back Jerusalem from the Hellenizing Greeks that were trying to cause them to stop keeping the Torah. That was the whole purpose. And I know there's some people like Jim Staley out there, and I know he means well, but there is no, I'm going to go to my next point here. There's no historical evidence that suggests Yahushua was conceived on December 25th. There's not anything in history that would suggest that. Nowhere in the census taken in Luke would suggest that. There's multiple things that would show that if you believe, the only people that it would be valid for believing that is those that still want to defend, which, and again, I don't, we could be wrong. Maybe he was born on tabernacles. I don't know. The point is, scripture doesn't say. So if you want to force the agenda of that he was conceived in Hanukkah, then you almost have to believe he was born on Sukkot, because 9 months later you would be in late September. I mean, that's just the way it works. So to me, there's no evidence for that. There's zero evidence that he would have been conceived in the winter. There's zero evidence, especially in December. There's just zero evidence that would have happened. And so a lot of these points I'm going to be getting into is a lot of these assertions that people want to fit Yahusha or a messianic narrative into Hanukkah. Hanukkah is not about a messianic narrative. I want to make this clear. When you read the book of Maccabees, there's no messianic prophecies in there. There's nothing mentioning the coming Messiah. Their story of itself was about how Yahuwah delivered their people from the Greeks. That's all it was about. That's it. There's no prophecies about the coming Messiah. There's no prophecies about how the light of the Hanukkah is symbolizing the light of the world. I get it. It sounds good, but it's not in the story. It's just not there. You're like trying to force Yahusha into a man-made, instituted festival that had nothing to do with him. It's like the light of the festival dedication was the physical menorah being brought back into the temple. That's why it eventually was called the Festival of Lights. It has nothing to do with spiritual. It had nothing, and I'll even read the quote from Josephus himself. This is why it got the name the Festival of Lights, and it wasn't even, he was the first person to really call it the Festival of Lights, by the way. No one before him ever called it that. So, let me just go on Brave here and copy and paste this link here to show you guys. This is what the quote of his said in let's see here. So come on, why not? That doesn't make any sense. Okay, when was Hanukkah first called Festival of Lights? And we're just getting started, guys. We haven't even gotten into the whole Shamash controversy yet. So this right here, this is when supposedly this is the first time it's called that. Okay. See here. So now it doesn't want to show about Josephus. Okay. The quote I found last night supposedly said Josephus was the first one in 94 to 96 AD to call it literally the Festival of Lights, referring to the bringing of the original menorah into the temple after it was cleansed. And that's another thing too, guys. The idea of cleansing the temple and doing an 8-day feast to cleanse the temple, it was already being done in Solomon's day. You can find this in the Book of Chronicles. This was already being done, right? And Solomon almost did a second Sukkot, just to show what I'm talking about with Second Maccabees. Second Maccabees is not the only place you can find this. If you look for Solomon's Sukkot, let me see if I can look that up real quick. The Feast of Tabernacles that Solomon celebrated after being anointed king and all that. All right. Feast of Tabernacles. They kept it for like 16 days, basically. Mm-hmm. There was like the initial Feast of Tabernacles that was happening at that time. Then they kept it for another 8 days, which is essentially what the Feast of Dedication is. It's like a traditionary second Sukkot, basically. So here, this is what it says here. Hopefully you guys can see my shared screen here. Solomon's Feast of Tabernacles, also known as Sukkot, the temple dedicated coincided with the Feast of Tabernacles. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Sounds similar to the Maccabean story, okay, which was celebrated for 2 weeks instead of one in honor of this great occasion. The feast was the time of joyous celebration as the Israelites celebrated Yahuwah's continued provision for them. So again, you can see a similarity between Solomon's temple dedication feast with what happened in the Maccabean era. I personally believe that's what they did. Was Judas Maccabeus maybe felt like, let's do something like Solomon did. Possibly. I'm just kind of speculating here. Possibly that's what it all Feast of Dedication was. It was them seeing something from 1 Kings chapter 8. This seems cool. We just cleansed the temple for Yahuwah. Let's do this. Let's celebrate this. Now, he probably got carried away with commanding it, making it a commandment for Israel, but that's a whole nother story, how that's adding to scripture there for him to do that, unless Yahuwah tells him to do that. So that's a whole nother story. Another topic I want to get into with here is, does John 10 promote does John 10 promote that Yahusha actually celebrated this? Because this is where people love to go. They love to go John 10 and let's see here. John 10, 22 to 26. Now it was the feast of dedication at Jerusalem, and it was winter. And Yahusha was walking in the temple in the portico, porch of Solomon. And so the Yahudim surrounded him. And so the Yahudim surrounded him and said to him, how long will you hold our souls in suspense? If you are the Messiah, tell us plainly. Yahusha answered them, I speak to you, and you do not believe. The works that I do in the name of my Father, these offer witness about me. Now notice how these 3 verses is not mentioning anything about him joining the celebration. But you do not believe because you are not of my sheep. And of course, the next verse says, my sheep hear my voice. So hopefully you guys see my point there, that if we're going to claim that he celebrated that, we're kind of being dishonest with ourselves. There's no really, and to be fair, just to play both sides here, there's no proof either one way or another. Either he condemned it or not condemned it at that point. So, you know. Oh. Let me just take a drink of water here. No. All right. So I have written down here with that bullet point, those that say we are commanded to celebrate this man-made feast are adding to scripture. Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 2. Mom, would you like to read that for us?
Sure. Okay. Do not add to what I command you, and do not subtract from it, but keep the commands of Yahuwah your Elohim that I give you.
Yep. So that's kind of self-explanatory. So anything that's instituted by man, and Yahuwah has not said that he's commanding us to do something, but it's man that's putting an ordinance forth, we cannot make it a command of Yahuwah. Okay. So let's see. My previous bullet points here. The original feast of dedication was never instituted by Yahuwah. It was a best ordinance and tradition of man. And we can also go to Mark 7, verses 6 to 7 to see how Yahusha feels about those that make a nice tradition. They start making it a commandment of the fathers, which the Father never commanded. How Yahuwah feels about that. Okay. Previous bullet point, 8-candle menorah is adding to Torah as well. Okay, the menorah was always 7 candlesticks. It was never 8. So when you see people celebrating it with the 8 candles and the Star of Remphan even on it, that is adding to Torah, and it's also idolatry. Usually you'll see them, they'll have their little ceremony where they're almost singing to the menorah. The menorah is almost becoming a god at that point. You're singing all these like little hymns, Jewish hymns, and it's called the Festival of Lights, and they're celebrating the light. And we're going to get into that too, why I believe more or less the Festival of Lights is not even Hanukkah today. It's a whole nother feast from a pagan culture.
Well,
Most of modern
here in Pasadena,
go ahead.
They created a menorah out of roses, and they lit it up. They lit it as a whole, like the whole light of the menorah. So instead of putting candles, they literally created an 8 candle menorah out of roses. And I wonder when they lit it and the whole thing, burnt down, what could that
Yeah.
signify? The fact that they were lighting it, Yeah, they did that here in Pasadena for Hanukkah a couple days ago.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't think Yahuwah is too keen on any. It doesn't matter the materials. The fact that you're adding to his Torah, he doesn't like it. He made it very specific in Exodus how you're supposed to make a menorah, and 8 candlesticks is adding to his Torah. So probably at best it could have been Yahuwah just giving a very loving warning not to do that. Like putting it out right away like that is kind of like saying, like, listen, I don't desire this. My children, I don't desire you adding to my law. My law is good enough as it is. But yeah, the 8 candlestick, that's all Judaism. That's all Judaism. There's not one commandment. Whether in Hanukkah, the original Hanukkah story, by the way, was not them putting a menorah in their homes. Like I said, if you look at the original Hanukkah story, the light of Hanukkah was about the Levites, the priests. Remember, we're still in the Levitical priesthood. It's 160 BC. Okay, it's still 100 to almost 200 years before Messiah came. They're still having a Levitical priesthood, even in captivity. So they're still trying to obey the Levitical priesthood, and them cleansing the temple, bringing the real menorah, the big menorah, the real menorah in there and lighting it is their duty. It's not like it was a special observance. This was already their duty to light the menorah every night. You see that in the Torah. So I think people are misunderstanding. I'm not trying to bash them, sis. They're just misunderstanding the purpose of what Hanukkah really was. It was a festival dedicating the temple that had been cleansed of that stupid pig that Antiochus sacrificed, cleansing that temple beforehand and rededicating that physical temple in Jerusalem to him. Yahuwah's house, essentially, was being rededicated to him. That was the purpose. It was not to, have gifts every night. It was not to have, your little spinning a little dreidel. It's not about that. It was never about that. That doesn't come later on until you get the Talmud. The Talmud talks about the miracle oil, which, by the way, never happened. It's a fable. It's a Judean fable. And Paul tells us what we should do to Judean fables that are not true. We should not pay attention to them. So the miracle oil story was basically the concept that they added to the story of the Feast of Dedication, that for every night, I forget how it works, like they celebrated the Judean victory, the Judas Maccabean victory for 8 nights in a row. That's how it originally went, and they would light 1 candle for each night. That was never part of the original story. That was tradition. It was never part of the original story. So there's a lot of this that they do today is not a part of the original story. Trying to think what else. So the 8 candle menorah, not scriptural or in Maccabees. The miracle oil story, not in Maccabees. Let's see if I'm missing anything here. I think we should go into the pagan part of this, and the bigger issue is the Babylonians and the Persians both had light winter solstice festivals. The Persians had something called Yalda. Let me see here. I should have these links in our Telegram here. No. All right, so we got Shamash here mentioned. Let me see here. Yalda. Let's go to the Yalda one first, right? All right, so Yalda, the ancient Iranian Persian festival celebrating light's victory over darkness. You ever notice, too, that with those that celebrate this modern counterfeit of the Feast of Dedication, they always try to spiritualize the light. They always try to spiritualize light winning over darkness. I get it; it sounds good, but where does that come from? What celebration like that does it come from? Um, Yalda is a pre-Islamic Iranian festival of the winter solstice, and is one of the four pivotal festivals marking the changing of seasons, alongside Nowruz for spring, Merigan for autumn, Tiragon. Yeah,
Yeah, interesting.
wonder if that seasoning got the name from that. Tiragon for summer. This year it falls on Sunday, December 22nd, which, by the way, not trying to scare y'all, some years Hanukkah does happen on the 22nd some years. So, again, why is it happening on the same date as this? That should make you raise your eyebrows a little bit, okay? It represents a metaphorical victory of love and warmth over the chill of winter, a period when hearts move closer to one another. Sound kind of similar spiritually to something else?
Joy of the season.
Yeah. The word itself may have Syriac Christian roots. Interesting. Meaning birth being absorbed into Old Persian at a time when the various Iranian peoples, including Persians and Parthians, came into contact with the Eastern Christians who were fleeing persecution in the first century AD. Yalda is also referred to as Shaba Chele, the night of the first 40 days of winter, which are often most difficult to bear. So the festival starts after the longest night of the year, yada yada. You see how it's just another winter solstice festival. Okay, it talks about how the whole celebration is about the light represents good triumphing over evil. Supposedly, it goes back to Zoroastrianism, religion of Iran. Bonfires are burnt. Yule logs, maybe. Okay, similar stuff. So you got until the return of the early morning light. See, this is what people don't understand, because people can read this and be like, wow, that kind of sounds like Yahusha. But who in the occult also represents light, a false light? Lucifer, the devil, right? Godriel, he is the false light. He is to the Freemasons the light, okay? So this is what you got to understand is a lot of these celebrations, just because it says it's celebrating light, doesn't mean it's celebrating Yahusha. Yahusha is the true light of the world. But a lot of these pagan festivals are celebrating the counterfeit light. That's what a lot of people don't understand. So let's go to the other one. So that's the Iranian version. We also have the Babylonian version, which is even older. So to me, it's a little skeptical that they call it the Festival of Light out of nowhere when the Maccabeans never called it that, by the way. So that's another thing that made me start to question modern day Hanukkah. Okay. The Festival of Shamash, celebrating light and justice. Now, just to FYI, the 8 candle we were talking about earlier, esoterically, Judaism calls it the Shamash. It's like the what do they call, like what do they call it, the invisible helper, or the invisible friend.
Yeah.
I think they
So right here,
the shamash is the candle that they use to light it with.
Okay. So the candle that they okay, so the candle that they light the rest with. Gotcha. So I could have swore that they have some esoteric title for it, like the individual help, like the invisible helper or something like that. It's some weird, like Kabbalistic, I forget exactly. But either way, this Shamash deity of Babylonian fame has a festival of light of its own. The Festival of Light celebrates the power of illumination. Yeah, where have we heard that phrase before? Illumination. The Gnostics, Kabbalism. Its role in dispelling darkness. Description of events and practice celebrations include lighting candles and bonfires. Symbolizing the triumph of light over darkness. Kind of sounds like Yalda of the Persians, doesn't it? So again, guys, just let's use some common sense, guys. Right? I'm not trying to be facetious about this. I'm being honest here. Like, I'm trying to be respectful and being honest about this. What does that sound like? So we got these festivals of light triumphing over darkness, and then you got the 8 candle menorah, and they celebrate light. To me, it sounds like this is a festival that is celebrating the false light. And to me, it's just there's something sketchy about this. There's something that doesn't make any sense, because what they celebrate Hanukkah as today is not what the original Hanukkah was.
Mhm.
So, and think about it too. What happened to Israel in 500 BC or 600 BC? Where did they go? Right? Babylon, right? What did we just read about Babylon? They have a winter solstice light festival.
Mhm.
Huh. Persia takes over Babylon when they're still there.
Mhm.
Not everyone has came back to Israel. And you have Cyrus, you have Darius, they're Persians. Huh. So is it possible that they could have changed or tried to dwarf the original Feast of Dedication story into this pagan festival of light, and then tried to pass it off as the Feast of Dedication? I think sometimes we don't we don't realize how sly the enemy is.
Mhm.
All he needs is a little bit of truth in something. He can give you a big fat lie
Yeah.
and sprinkle a little truth in it. And that's what this is. That's what I believe it is. And brother just messaged something. The Festival of Calenda. Let me put that on the share screen here. So, Festival of Calenda. I've never even heard of this one before. Festival of Calenda. I've never heard of this. Really? Wonder who believes that. Originated by Adam? She's Yeah, the Kabbalists, of course.
Mhm.
Yeah, because see, the Kabbalists actually believe Adam was taught esoteric things. This is where the Kabbalah and Gnosticism are kind of hand in hand. If you ever know about any of the Gnostic books, and I think the Apocalypse of Adam is the Gnostic book, where it talks about supposedly Adam was given all this heavenly knowledge by an angel and all that. That's where Gnosticism and the Kabbalah kind of intertwine with that belief system that Adam was originally given esoteric knowledge that he forgot when he sinned, and all that jazz. So yeah, they would believe that he celebrated that. Calenda. I just never heard of this in my life.
The
Uh,
link that I sent in the chat, I think is a little bit more informative.
so it seems like this happens right on the solstice. So it seems to happen right after this supposable shortest day of the year, December 17th. Interesting. Someone posted this on Safaria? That's interesting. I'm surprised they were allowed to post it. Gemara Rav Hanan Bar Rava says, I guess this is a Jewish scholar. When are these festivals celebrated? Calenda is celebrated during the 8 days after the winter solstice, and Saturnalia is celebrated during the 8 days before the winter solstice. And you're mnemonic to remember which festival is that. The one that occurs after the solstice is mentioned first in the Mishnah, and the festival that takes place before the solstice is mentioned after, as in the verse, "You have hemmed me in behind and before and laid your hand upon me," where the word before appears after the term behind. So that's a weird interpretation of that verse. Let's see. Calenda, from which the English word calendar derives, interesting, refers to the first day of the month. specific, especially to the first day of the year. Saturnalia was a popular Roman holiday on the 17th of December, dedicated to Saturn. Criticis, which was on the 1st of August, commemorated the day that Augustus conquered Alexandria in Egypt. This is interesting. So, yeah. So, according to this, there seems to be stuff in the Mishnah about it, originally being pagan, like modern day Hanukkah being pagan. Medieval scribes often did not know what these holidays were or what their names were, and different forms of the words can be found in other versions of the Mishnah. The anniversary of accession of the king to the throne is also considered to be a day of celebration full of idolatrous practices. The final 2 days of idolatrous celebration are personal, one's birthday and the anniversary of death of a close friend. On these days, non-Judeans would make idolatrous celebrations. Interestingly, Judeans did not traditionally celebrate birthdays because it was seen to be a non-Yahudim custom. Yeah, I remember finding that. Yeah. Yeah, there's actual proof that they didn't celebrate birthdays. Yeah, they're even in the Mishnah. That's in the Mishnah there. So it's very clear they didn't celebrate birthdays. Yeah. Yeah, this is weird, man, that they think Adam would have celebrated this. That's crazy. That's crazy. Yeah, because they, like I said, they have a different version of creation. The Kabbalists and the Gnostics think that Adam and Enoch did some type of workings to achieve salvation and did like alchemy and all that. Like if you talk to a New Ager, that's what they think about Adam too. They think that all the patriarchs were given divine knowledge before expelled from the garden and all that. The sages taught when Adam, the first man, saw the day was progressively diminishing, yada, yada, yada. Yeah. Anyway, the importance of this, though, is a guy on a Jewish website, seemingly a Jewish man, is admitting that Hanukkah was originally pagan and had and coincided to the similar time of the year to the winter solstice. So, I mean, I don't know what else to say. You got a Jewish person saying that on a Jewish website. So, but anyway, I mean, there's so many proofs of this. I really think the fact that we can see that this originated they either took it from the Persians or the Babylonians. I think that's evidence enough. And Safaria.org link is enough to show that it was definitely borrowed from the heathen. There was no such thing as celebrating the idea of light as a physical ritual in Hebrew culture. Yes, Yahushua's the light of the world. I get it, and all that. But in no way, shape, or form was really the intent of that, even with modern day Hanukkah. I think where we get this idea that Hanukkah is about Yahushua is really when you get people that come out of Christianity, come into the Hebrew roots, and then try to reclaim something that was never ours to begin with. I think is what they try to do. They try to make it about the true light of the world, and they try to almost super spiritualize that celebration to point to Yahushua, where we have no evidence. Like I said, the original Feast of Dedication, there's no evidence that man-made festival was ever about a coming Messiah. It was simply about resetting apart Yahuwah's dwelling place. That's all it was about. You know? And so I understand people mean well, but we gotta be honest with what even these apocryphal books say. You know, if we're gonna base a celebration off of what is in those books, then you can't start adding to it and say, oh, well, this is about Yahushua, when Yahushua never said the Feast of Dedication was about him. There's no hint he ever celebrated it. There's no connection there. Even in the New Testament, there's no connection. He doesn't say that, like, oh yeah, this this celebration they're doing here is about me. He never says that. So, this is what happens when you get Messianic Judaism, is you get these guys that I think do mean well, but they're trying to reappropriate Jewish customs to Yahusha, and it's just not going to work. A lot of these Jewish customs came from rabbis and sages that didn't believe in him. If we're talking about modern Hanukkah, that a lot of that stuff's from Talmud, Mishnah. None of those guys would have believed in him for the most part. So why would they make it about him? It doesn't make any sense. Now, I understand the logic is the original Feast of Dedication was by the Maccabees and not the Talmud and all that. But even the original the original Feast of Dedication was centuries before he came. Their purpose, Judas Maccabeus' purpose, was not about awaiting the Savior. That wasn't his purpose about the feast. That's not what happened. We're just telling revisionist history. We start saying that Yahushua was conceived on December 25th or whatever, and that this feast somehow points to him. The thing is, Yahushua has 7 feasts that point to him.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't need any more. He's got 7.
That's right.
He's got 7 that are all about him. Every aspect of them is about him. He doesn't need a man-made, man-instituted, quote unquote, air quotes here, man-instituted, festival to be about him. So, again, all I'm going to say here, and my final words are, do your research, figure out, get into prayer with Yahuwah, see what he wants you to do. All I'm going to say is, if you choose to keep this optional festival, not mandatory, optional, it's not commanded by Yahuwah, just try to do it the right way. That's all I can say. Try to do it how the Maccabees would have done it if you want to do that. Our household, we don't feel obligated to do what they did. We really haven't even fully researched yet into the theologies of the Maccabees after this whole thing happens. Because there seems to be, I know, Brother Yahusha, you have done a lot more research than I have, and according to your research you found in others that have researched this, they weren't exactly fully righteous, after this fact. They started kind of getting carried away. So again, we don't know the mindset of these guys, why they felt this was necessary to be commanded to keep and all that. So I'm just going to keep my hands clean of this until, unless Yahuwah tells me that I should be, that it would be a tube thing to keep it. It's not necessary. I don't think Purim is necessary either. That was not instituted by the Father either. It's very clear in the book of Esther that it was a man-made instituted festival. And it's not commanded by the Father. So again, anyway, if none of us have anything else to add, I think we're going to close this study for today.
Well, I just want to say that just piggybacking on what you said, remember that the enemy will always put distractions before us, and whatever he can use to take away from worshiping Yahuwah, he's going to do it. So all these Purims, all these Maccabee stuff, all this Hanukkah, Christmas, New Year's, all this stuff that he's putting before the world is just a distraction to divert from the worship of Yahuwah.
That's right.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely, sister.
Definitely.
And I think people in this walk in Torah, I believe some people are grasping onto this particular thing because they know the Jews keep it, and it's kind of like, well, we've given up Christmas, we've come to that realization, and maybe it's even subconscious, but they're almost like utilizing this feast to fulfill whatever they feel they've lost in giving up Christmas. And I do think that's a reality for some people.
Yeah, exactly. Like the Christians talking about Harvest Day for Halloween. They're just
Yeah.
replacing one thing
That's
for
right.
another, right?
That's sister.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Yeah.
Hanukkah, I mean, even though Hanukkah is kind of different because they give gifts for 8 days, I don't think Christians have that kind of money to give gifts for 8 days, but it is a replacement for them because then and this year, believe it or not, Christmas and Hanukkah landed on the same day. They said that doesn't happen, that it hasn't happened for like many years or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's like your mom says, they're just replacing one thing for another because they just can't give up. They just can't give up what they've been taught, and it's just makes it where they're like, okay, it's okay for us to do this because the Jews keep it, right? The Jews keep it, so it must be right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's just you're feeding your flesh in a different way.
Yep.
You're finding a way to feed the flesh, which is a big issue. Why even some Christians that know they should not be doing this because it's out there in front of their face. I have never seen a year where so many people were out there with the information about the origin of Saturnalia. And, so I really think that this is just people trying to find a way to feed their flesh.
But aren't more pastors in the Christian church coming out against Christmas now? Like there's several pastors now that are starting to realize that
I think so. What's really disturbing is that there are also pastors coming out to defend it, and they acknowledge the origin. They acknowledge everything that's factual, but they feel it's fine that we're changing it to mean this.
Yeah.
They don't get it because they're not in the Torah.
Yeah.
They don't understand when Yahuwah said, you cannot make something profane into something set apart. They're ignoring all that if they ever read it at all.
Yeah.
But that's to me the biggest disturbing thing is now there are Christian pastors or Christian leaders out there going on YouTube and defending it.
But they also say, "Oh, it's about the symbolism." It's
exactly.
And even though we know it's not the birth of Yeshua, we're just symbolizing his birth, even though we know that it was never told us in the scriptures exactly when he was born.
Right.
Or it's for the children. Christmas is for the children.
Yeah, it's for the children. Right. It's for the children.
That was kind of the point of today in that quote I just read from the Mishnah. Their own people don't celebrate birthdays. That's kind of the bigger point.
Yeah.
If you want to be a child of the Most High, you have to take the culture of his people too.
That's right.
They don't acknowledge birthdays.
Nope.
Yahushua would have never wanted his birthday at any time of the year acknowledged. They looked at it. I mean, we could go throughout scripture. That's a whole nother topic for a whole nother day. We don't have time for it, but that's a whole nother topic that you can go throughout scripture. They didn't look at someone's birth as a joyous occasion. Usually, it's a whole different paradigm with the Hebrew people. They understood the moment that baby is born, it is born into a sinful body that is eventually going to sin.
That's right.
Physically sin, physically break the Torah. So in a weird way, they did not look at births the way the heathen looked at births. They did not look at it as, oh my goodness, we need to annually celebrate this every year because it's such a joyous occasion. Because the thing is, throughout your whole life, you're battling with sin.
Now I wonder if the Jews, you know how they do bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs. I wonder if they wait until the 13th year to celebrate birthdays, and then they don't, because from 1 to 13, I'm wondering if they don't celebrate it, and then when the 13th birthday comes, because according to what you just said, they didn't celebrate any birthdays in the days of Yeshua. So I'm just wondering if the Jews of today if
Yeah.
they wait until the 13th year to kind of do this big event that they do, because bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs are big events for
Yeah.
Jews.
Very big, very big.
Yeah. Well, initially, what they were, according to the Talmud, it wasn't about a certain age. It was about the fact that they're becoming a man at that age. So they looked at it spiritually that a boy is no longer a boy at his bar mitzvah. It was about him becoming a man and start dedicating his life to the Torah. It had nothing to do with a birthday at all.
Right.
See, modern day Judaism doesn't even understand their so-called roots. They don't even understand what the sages of the first, second, third centuries believed. They don't understand their own culture because, quite frankly, they're not the people of the book. I'm not trying to be mean, but they're not the people of the book.
And what
A lot
about
of
the
those
girls? What about bat mitzvahs when they do the girls?
they're supposed to become women. Most old school Jews will tell you this, that it has nothing to do with being a birthday or birthday party. It was initially in their own culture to symbolize women became marriageable maidens at 13. If you actually look at history and the tradition of Mary and when she got married, she was 13. This has all been documented in tradition. This has all been documented that this was their culture, that the men were more was the word I'm looking for, more mature in those times than westernized men. And the same thing with women. Men were men at 13, women were women at 13. That's where it came from. The whole bar mitzvah thing was never about a birthday party. It was never about a sweet 16 or whatever. That's modernized culture that has changed their own traditions to fit westernized culture. But initially, their own tradition of a bar mitzvah was like, okay, now you're a man. Now you have to dedicate your life to reading the Torah. And that was the whole purpose of it. So, that's initially what it was. But as far as what their own books say, the Mishnah says and all that, they never not once would celebrate a birthday. They considered it a Gentile custom, a disgusting Goyim custom. So we think that the Messiah wants us to celebrate his birthday when he's a Hebrew. It is utterly ridiculous. It's he would have had the same exact, maybe not hatred towards the Goyim, but Yahusha would have had hatred towards that custom. He would have looked at it as filthy, unclean.
Yeah.
So the whole idea of celebrating a birthday is like farthest thing from his mind and the Father's mind. That whole rationale, it doesn't even matter that December 25th is not his birthday. That's besides the point. The point is he never would have wanted a celebration like that. The point is that that's not the Hebrews' mindset. They don't look at birthdays as like, oh my goodness, let's have a party. They looked at it in a different way. You look at Job, what he said about his own birth. You look at some of the Hebrews that when they were down and low trodden, they would talk about, that the day of my birth just, all it did was I got born into this sinful body of flesh that now from the time I'm born till the time I die, I'm constantly fighting against, sin. That's how they looked at it. That and that's
like
it's
like being born in hell on earth.
yeah, because since the fall happened, that's what would happen. Since Adam's sin, Adam's transgression goes all the way up to Moses, even all the way up to Moses. So that meant every man or woman that was born since Adam's sin had a defect of sin physically, genetically in their body. That they were their body, their flesh, their indwelling flesh made them tempted to sin of itself. Like the flesh of itself is inclined to sin. So
and not just man, but the whole creation as well.
Yeah. Well, but yeah. So that's kind of the point, is that regardless whatever time of the year his birthday was, the point I'm trying to making is he would have never wanted celebrated. So it doesn't matter if if we know his real birthday. Doesn't matter if his birthday's on September 11th. If that's true, he doesn't want it celebrated. Paul told us what Yahusha wants us to remember is what he did for us.
That's right.
That's the thing, to remember his death and his resurrection.
Mhm.
He nowhere in the Brit Hadashah does ever say, remember my birth, celebrate my birth every year. Nowhere does it mention that.
No.
It doesn't even focus that much on his birth after he comes into the world. It's like, it's kind of one and done thing. Okay, now he's born.
Yeah.
It was a joyous thing because the Messiah came into the world. That's why it was a
That's
big deal.
right.
Other than that, after that, you don't see Yahusha ever referencing his birth again, really. You know, it's not like something that should be an anniversary or whatever you want to call it. It's not something that he's telling his disciples, okay, you should celebrate this every year. No. So, and that's what we have to understand is when now that we're Yahuwah's people, we have to take on the culture of his people.
Yeah, that's right.
We should understand there is certain things that he instilled into even the culture of his people to not like. Do not be like the Gentiles. Do not learn of Egypt. Do not do the ways of Egypt. Egypt kept birthdays. The Greeks kept birthdays. The almost every pagan culture kept birthdays.
Yeah.
The Hebrews were like the only people that said, no, that's a disgusting custom. We're never going to do it.
That's right.
So,
Brother
anyway,
Doug, you know how in the beginning of the scriptures in the book of Genesis, it talks about the genealogy of all of these people, and it tells you how many years they were born, and it tells you, oh, such and such a person lived to be a number of years, and then they begot. So how do we explain to someone that says, but look, they can tell you how many years they were born, so that means that they were celebrating something, right?
Oh, celebrating and taking record of something are two different things. Chronology or chronicling something versus making an annual celebration every year, a party, are not synonymous whatsoever.
Yeah, that's kind of like if someone's arrested, they keep tabs of the day they were arrested and the day they were freed.
I'll give you a simple answer, sis. You can answer someone like that. Chronicling someone's genealogy is about keeping track of your family name, keeping track of those of your genealogy. That's the point. There's no other purpose for genealogy. Well, actually, there is. Let me correct myself. I lied by mistake there. There is one other purpose. Yahusha had to come through Judah, right? So they need a genealogy of their people to prove that he is the true Messiah. We can go to Matthew. We can go to the genealogies in scriptures and trace back Yahusha came through the line of Judah. And also Levites, right? Levites have to have their genealogy to prove they're a Levite. These are the real purposes of genealogies, not to celebrate your birthday. That has nothing to do with a genealogy. So genealogies are important. They're definitely important, but they're more about making record of something, if that makes any sense. They keep records, okay? Because when they went to Babylon and they came back, right, what happened? They lost records of who was a Levite or not, and then they were screwed. So there's a lot of reasons why they keep genealogical records. Personally, I think too, possibly with the genealogy specifically of Genesis 5, one could make the argument the genealogies are there is for us to keep track of, how old this earth is technically. If you add up, all the ages, it would give you a decent amount of years of human history, supposedly. So, depending on which version you have, the Masoretic versus Septuagint, one has made the argument that technically speaking, if you look at the genealogies, you add all the years up together, the Masoretic, we're about 57 to 5,800 years old, this earth, versus the Septuagint is like 7,500. So there's definitely purposes for the genealogy. It's not, though, to celebrate birthdays. We can know for a fact it's not for that. It's for chronicling. It's for keeping track of something. That's why Chronicles does it. That's why other books do it. Genesis does it. Is to keep records. That's the way they kept records of things. But anyway, that's a whole nother interesting study, possibly for another day to dive into. Is how those genealogies changed to kind of promote a whole idea that it has to be. I was talking to a sister about this the other day. How this is my opinion. I can't prove it, but I think the Mazarites changing the genealogies also affects our understanding of when the millennial is supposed to happen. Because I heard it like, most of my walk, people would say, well, see, once it's 6,000 years, it's the end of the world and all of that. And if it's true that the Septuagint would have a different age of the earth than the Masoretic, then that theory kind of goes out that the millennium has to happen in the seventh day prophetically. Because we would technically, according to that chart I showed you guys, if that's accurate, that would be saying we're already in the seventh day right now, prophetically. And Yahushua hasn't, his return is not yet. So technically, a lot of people's understanding on when the millennium is supposed to start, as far as, it has to be specifically on the very seventh day, prophetically, the 7,000th year. Technically, that's due to the Masoretic age of the earth. As far as I know, the idea that this earth is a little less than 6,000 years old can only be proven from what I've seen with the Masoretic model of Genesis 5. There's no way otherwise to prove that. So it's kind of interesting when you actually look at the differences in the genealogies. It could have some serious implications, possibly, about prophetically where we actually are. But anyway, so all right. Well, I'm sorry, guys, for taking our audience to too many rabbit trails. Hopefully, they still were able to follow along with us with this little bit of commentary here at the end. So, if you guys are looking for fellowship, I know I just saw a sister out there, and I know there's been at least one or two brothers that have reached out in the comments section. If anyone's looking for fellowship, feel free to reach out. Other than that, enjoy the rest of Yahuwah and Yahusha's Baruch Shabbat. Have a great rest of the Sabbath, everyone. Shalom. Shabbat shalom.